continue fly hat closeout for Op Port 20.
Okay. Over CC.
This is episode 000 of Last Week from the Near Future, the show where I share with you the curious tidbits that tickled my brain last week from the Near Future Laboratory Discord server. But number one, the Imagine Harder Summit. So a week or so ago was the Imagine Harder Summit, and I'll tell you what happened. I sent an email to about 24 people who I wanted to gather together to discuss how we can collectively ignite a renaissance of creativity, something that was powered by this curious ability we humans have, which is to imagine the world otherwise. It's an ability that exists in this bizarre hunk of vascularized meat in our heads, which is this engine called imagination. That summit in Detroit took place in the gorgeous Affleck House, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it was just a start. The summit was thoughtful, energized, kinetic. Every single moment felt exactly like I thought it should when I sent a simple email with effectively no really meaningful heads up. It was about 6 weeks ahead of time. I was asking people to meet me in Detroit so we can do what may be the most important thing that we all do individually and now need to do collectively and collaboratively, find the way to bring imagination back into the world and put it into the rich, meaningful, value-creating collaboration with structure. The Imagine Harder Summit was an experiment, really, to see if we can figure out how to bring about new stories for earthly survival, to create a new kind of subject that has the creative, cognitive, practical, technical consciousness that is prepared to be landed back on Earth and not on Mars. We're planning a follow-up event later this winter, and then a festival-scale unconference in Tokyo in Q2 next year. So if you want to find out more, you're going to have to pick up my latest book, It's Time to Imagine Harder. Everything's in there. It's the world's first book to come with a subscription, where I'll be sharing more details, updates on the Detroit event, and more. That's right, it's a book. It comes with a festival. Number 2, famous last words. Drew sent this one through in the Discord. Drew pointed to a new podcast called Ingenious, hosted by Katarina Fake, the episode where she laments with Dave Eggers the onslaught of AI.
Dave's not in a panic. He's more unimpressed or outraged, and more certain than ever about the brilliance of the human mind.
We have to remember, it can't read, it can't write, it can't create art. So there's no such thing as AI art. That's a non sequitur. There's no such thing as AI writing. It's not writing. It's pastiche.
It's assemblage.
It's assemblage. If, like, a wrecking ball knocked down our bookshelf and you arrange those words in some way, then that's as much of as it's not creation. So I think that we have to forget all of those things from now and forever. It will never be able to read, write, draw, create. If you decide to use those tools, that's you've crossed the Rubicon, and it's not art, it's not creation, it's not writing.
Yeah.
It cannot be used in the act of creation.
I have to say I found their take surprisingly retrograde. They sounded a bit like the curmudgeons who said, upon its introduction, that mechanical photography was not art. Well, I suppose to have to take account their feelings are more the result of wanting to counter the zealousness and confusion and anger about AI at this particular moment. What do I think? Well, personally, I'm affirmed in my sense of the possibilities while simultaneously convinced that there's an underlying malevolency lurking about. That is to say, I use AI as often as possible, with glee and gusto, while also remaining simultaneously convinced it is out to eat us, which makes me think that AI is a bit like paying taxes. You do it because it's hard not to, and it's not going away, while at the same time it's going to do things you never would spend your money on. Number 3, critical zones at ZKM with Donna, Harawy, and Bruno Latour. I don't know how I stumbled back across this tape. Maybe YouTube sent me to it or something. But there was this epic exhibition, Critical Zones, at ZKM, which happened during the pandemic. At that time, I remember I tuned in as best as I could, but it was also the pandemic and everything in life was so distracting and confusing. So I'm glad I went back to it. And if you haven't listened to Donna Harawy and Bruno Latour's conversation, you should. And maybe even listen to it twice or 3 times like I did. Here's an excerpt with Donna's take on AI. I found it a thoughtful contrast to Katarina Fake and Dave Eggers.
In this book, Novacine, he writes that the rise of artificial intelligence is the next step in evolution. So I ask you, want to hear your opinion, please.
Well, insofar as the next step in evolution is, first of all, an orthogenetic view of evolution. So we've moved from the primal soup, and now finally we're going to bliss off Earth into total artificial intelligence. That's truly silly. On the other hand, artificial intelligence is an actual materialist practice that does really interesting things. that can be possibly that integrated into art practices or labor practices or maybe kinds of agricultural practices of different. I'm not against the materialist practices and skills of artificial intelligence. I am totally beyond against the stupid notion of orthogenetic evolution toward blissing off Earth, finally in artificial intelligence or total roboticization.
For clarification, orthogenesis, in the context of artificial intelligence and the evolution of human consciousness, refers to a hypothesis that suggests a predetermined, directed, or teleological progression in the development of intelligence, both natural and artificial. It posits that there is an inherent drive or directionality guiding the evolution of intelligence, or consciousness towards specific goals or outcomes. In the realm of artificial intelligence, orthogenesis might imply that AI development is moving towards a predetermined endpoint or level of sophistication, driven by some intrinsic force or design. However, it's important to note that AI development is primarily guided by human efforts, goals, and limitations, rather than a mysterious, predetermined path. Orthogenesis would suggest that the development of human intelligence and consciousness follows a predetermined path, possibly leading to a specific state or goal. The concept of orthogenesis has faced criticism and is not widely accepted in modern evolutionary biology and AI research. Evolutionary processes are typically seen as more contingent and subject to environmental pressures and random variations, while AI development is driven by human choices, research, and technological progress.
Parenthetically, I also strongly recommend this beautiful film, Storytelling for Earthly Survival. It's a few years old now, maybe more. It's a wonderful story about Donna and her thinking, and really kind of exquisitely edited. And I have to say it out loud because it's important to show thanks and grace for those who showed us a path. I'm forever grateful for having had a life-changing opportunity to be mentored and taught by Donna Harawy. She was one of the small handful of people who saw something in me that I couldn't see or understand myself. So thank you, Donna. Also, thank you, Dave Mackery, elementary school art teacher. Thank you, Mr. Biancasino, for trusting me to help anchor the high school studio band rhythm section. Thank you, Bruce Sterling, for taking an interest. Thank you, Professor Kate Cummings, for letting me audit your cyberpunk class at the University of Washington. Okay, number 4, current status in the NFL Discord. Well, Thomas handed off Green Pages. That's one of our forthcoming artifacts from the future. It's a magazine from the future of film entertainment like Variety or American Cinematographer, but from an adjacent or near future where what counts as filmmaking has changed or evolved. Look for that to drop in the coming months. Super excited about that one. And speaking of AI, our new project is now available, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. It's another artifact, almost certainly from an adjacent possibility, where androids are amongst us and are as menacing, complicated, unwelcome as television remote controls, connected speakers, USB chargers, USB dongles, and autonomous vacuum cleaners. This artifact is quite the experiment, taking the form of a self-help book called Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, an analysis of the android psyche. It's like a crappy pulp paperback book you might pick up at the airport newsstand to have a light read on the flight so as to better understand and empathize with your whatever, Honeywell Android gardener or your Boeing Android dog walking droid. Okay, number 5, Evan's podcast episode. So near future laboratory Discord member Evan Raskob was on the Ludogogy. How do you say that? Ludogogy. Why can't they just say it's the Ludogogy Podcast? It's something podcast just the other day. It's about play, but I can't pronounce it. Ludogogy. Ludogogy. Can't pronounce it. Evan was on this podcast, and it's fun listen, partly to hear where Evan's head is at, and partly to idly wonder more about the role of the playful consciousness as a great unlock for creative practice. I wonder how we can adopt the sensibility and spirit of play without it just meaning video games, LARPing, and board games. I'm sure someone's figured this stuff out. Okay, number 6, office hours. You've likely heard me say that we do office hours every Friday at 9 a.m. California time. It's a free-ranging discussion typically focused on the things you want to discuss that might come to mind if you're at the vanguard of creative, imaginative material-making practices. You're kind of vectored towards the kinetic fashioning of more habitable worlds. If that's you, that can come to office hours. We announce them in the Discord. Okay, number 7, Patreon. Yes, all this work is supported by all the awesome patrons on the Near Future Laboratory Patreon page. There are 3 ways you can support and encourage me in building this bulwark of an enterprise, help shore up the defenses we need to protect the creative consciousness from the debilitating blows of too much structure. Number 1, buy something from shop.nearfuturelaboratory.com right now. I'll wait. Number 2, come to one of our mini events like General Seminar, Super Seminar, and the Design Fiction Debrief, doing one of those this Wednesday. Number 3, go to patreon.com/nearfuturelaboratory and become a defender of the creative consciousness. Super simple. Number 8, carrier bag theory of fiction. Hey, Chesterbot, what is the carrier bag theory of fiction?
Ursula K. Le Guin's carrier bag theory of fiction challenges conventional narratives that focus on conflict, heroes, and linear progression. Instead, she proposes a different kind of storytelling, akin to a market tote bag or backpack, which holds various elements together without a hierarchical structure. This theory emphasizes collaboration, relation, and interconnection over domination and conflict. Le Guin argues that stories, like carrier bags, can be a tool for gathering, containing, and sharing rather than a weapon for conquering. Traditional hierarchical narrative tells rather than includes, and has familiar tropes that are in need of a refresh. The carrier bag theory of fiction is a critique of top-down narratives and an opportunity to develop fresh and evolved forms of storytelling that include objects, elements, components, and partiality to express the multivalent nature of experience, and to leave open opportunities to insert one's imagination.
And that's it. That was last week from the near future. I'm Julian, and I'm out.